Even in the silence of loneliness, God's love keeps you standing. There are nights when the silence becomes almost unbearable, when your heart beats so loudly that it feels like an echo in a hollow room. You look at the ceiling, and everything around you feels still, almost too still, as if even heaven has forgotten to move. You whisper words that vanish before they reach the sky, and all you get in return is a silence so deep it hurts. But what if this silence isn't the end of love? What if it's the way God's love speaks when words would be too small? What if this quiet that feels so heavy is actually a holy pause, a moment when heaven holds its breath, just to let your soul feel how much it is seen, even when it feels unseen? Loneliness is not always proof that you're forgotten. Sometimes, it's proof that you're being rebuilt in secret. That the God who once spoke through thunder now whispers through the absence, reshaping your faith in the dark, where sight can no longer guide you. Because when the noise fades, only truth remains. And the truth is, you're still loved, deeply, silently, eternally. Even in the silence of loneliness, God's love keeps you standing. The unseen weight of loneliness. Loneliness doesn't crash in like a storm. It drifts in quietly, settling into the corners of your soul like dust that refuses to be swept away. It's not loud. It's subtle. It lives in the spaces between your thoughts, in the moments when the world stops talking and you're left with nothing but your own heartbeat. There's a strange ache that comes when life gets too quiet, a pressure that builds behind your ribs. You start remembering every voice that used to fill the room, every laughter that once touched your heart, every face that no longer stays. It's not just the absence of people you miss. It's the absence of warmth, of belonging, of purpose. You begin to ask the quiet questions no one hears. God, are you still there? Do you still see me? Do you still care? And then nothing. Just air. You wait for thunder, for miracles, for something to shake the silence. But nothing moves. And maybe that's the hardest part, not the pain itself, but the stillness that follows it. The world keeps turning, but you've stopped somewhere between what was and what's next. Yet in that stillness, something sacred begins to stir. Because God's love doesn't always arrive with sound. Sometimes it comes in the quiet strength that makes you get up again. Sometimes it's the calm that refuses to let you break. Sometimes it's the tears that fall, not from despair, but from surrender. When you realize you're not fighting the silence anymore, you're learning to rest inside it. This is the holy paradox of loneliness. It breaks you open so that grace can enter. It empties you so love can fill the spaces no one else could reach. And one day when you look back, you'll understand. This quiet wasn't punishment. It was preparation. Because silence is where the heart finally learns to hear what noise always drowned, that God's love never leaves. It waits. When heaven feels quiet, you've prayed until your voice cracked. You've whispered the same words night after night, hoping that this time heaven might answer back. But all you get is silence. Heavy, unshakable silence. And in that silence, your heart begins to ask questions that faith once silenced easily. God, are you still listening? Do you still see me? It's strange how silence can sound so loud. It echoes inside your chest until it becomes almost unbearable. You look around and see others receiving answers, breakthroughs, blessings, while you're still here, waiting. You start to wonder if maybe your prayers got lost on their way to heaven. But silence, though painful, is never wasted. In fact, it's often the clearest form of God's love. Because silence is where faith stops being theory and becomes truth. It's where love is tested, not by noise, but by trust. It's where you discover that God's love doesn't need to shout to be real. Maybe heaven is quiet not because God is absent, but because He's close, closer than your thoughts, closer than your pulse. You just can't hear Him because His voice is no longer around you. It's within you. The divine doesn't always come with sound. Sometimes it comes as stillness that holds you steady when everything else falls apart. The truth is, We often mistake God's silence for rejection, when it's actually refinement. He's not ignoring you. He's teaching you the language of peace. He's showing you that real faith doesn't depend on emotional noise. It's built on sacred knowing. The silence is not empty. It's pregnant with purpose. It's the holy space between your question and His answer, between your confusion and His clarity. Every unanswered prayer, every quiet moment that felt unbearable, it's shaping something unseen inside you. If you listen closely, you'll start to hear it. Not a voice from the sky, but a whisper from within. It says, "Be still. I'm still here." It's the voice of love that refuses to let go. Heaven's quiet is not a punishment. It's a promise. Because if you can trust God in the silence, you'll be unshakable when He speaks. So, let this silence do its work. Let it strip away the fear that says you've been forgotten. Let it deepen your roots in trust. Because one day this quiet season will speak for itself, and you'll realize it wasn't silence after all. It was the sacred sound of love, moving beneath the surface, steady and unstoppable. The strength hidden in the stillness. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes it's invisible. Sometimes it looks like holding yourself together when your world is falling apart. It's the way you rise again after crying all night. It's the way you keep showing up, even when your faith feels fragile. That's not weakness. That's divine strength disguised as surrender. You may think you're surviving by your own will, but that steady heartbeat inside your chest is grace. Quiet, unshakable grace. Every breath you take when it hurts to breathe is proof that God's love is sustaining you, even when you can't feel it. The world will tell you that strength means control, being unbreakable, untouched, untouchable. But heaven defines it differently. True strength is soft. It's patient. It's born in stillness. It's the power that comes when everything else is stripped away, and all that's left is your bare soul standing before God, whispering, "I'll still trust you." And that whisper? It moves mountains. Stillness doesn't mean nothing is happening. It means everything is happening, just beneath the surface. Like roots that grow deeper in silence unseen by the world, your spirit is strengthening in ways you don't yet understand. Every tear that fell in solitude was noticed. Every breath you took when you wanted to give up was sacred. Every time you said, "I'll try again," heaven celebrated quietly, because love was winning inside you. Loneliness teaches endurance that comfort never could. It refines your faith, shapes your patience, humbles your pride, and stretches your heart. And though it feels like emptiness, it's actually sacred construction. Because God's love is not a feeling that visits you on good days. It's the foundation that holds you when everything else collapses. You may not see it, but it's there, weaving through every silent night, whispering through every ache. You're not standing alone. You're standing with me. One day when you look back on this season, you'll see it differently. You'll see that the silence was not lifeless. It was alive with transformation. You'll see that the stillness you hated became the strength you needed. You'll realize that what felt like absence was the training ground of endurance. And when the noise returns, counters when life fills again with sound and motion, you'll recognize something unshakable within you, a quiet courage, a sacred peace, a deep knowing that no silence can ever destroy. Because it was never your strength that kept you standing. It was God's love, working in silence, turning your loneliness into light. When the heart learns to listen again, there comes a moment, somewhere in the long road of silence, when your heart begins to change. It's not something you notice right away. It doesn't happen with thunder or revelation. It happens quietly, like dawn breaking after a long night, light seeping in one fragile line at a time. You begin to realize that silence was never punishment. It was permission. Permission to slow down, to breathe, to truly listen. not with your ears, but with your soul. For so long, you listened to everything around you. The noise of the world, the opinions, the expectations, the endless demands for performance. You learned to measure your worth by responses, applause, validation. You mistook recognition for love and busyness for purpose. But now, in this quiet, everything that was loud has faded. All that remains is your heart, raw, open, waiting. It's here, in this sacred emptiness, that something begins to awaken. The heart remembers what it was created for. It remembers the rhythm of God's love, that gentle, steady pulse that's been there all along, beating beneath the noise. It remembers that peace is not found in noise or motion, but in connection. Have you noticed how silence changes your senses? The way you start to feel more than you hear? The way your breath becomes slower, your awareness sharper, your emotions truer? That's not loneliness. That's awakening. That's the heart learning to listen again. You begin to sense love in things you used to overlook, in the golden light filtering through the trees, in the warmth of a morning cup of coffee, in the sound of your own laughter returning after weeks of stillness. You start to realize that God's love doesn't need grand gestures to be real. Sometimes it hides in small mercies, in the simple beauty of being alive. And suddenly, you're not just hearing the world again, you're feeling it. You're noticing how time slows when peace enters. You're no longer rushing to fill every space, you're learning to dwell in them. You're no longer begging for answers. You're learning to trust the quiet that follows your questions. Because when your heart learns to listen again, it begins to recognize that love has been speaking the whole time. It was never gone. You were just too surrounded by noise to notice. Maybe that's why God allows silence, to bring us back to the language of love, a language that needs no words. The kind that heals not by explanation but by presence. So now when silence comes, you no longer resist it. You sit with it. You let it hold you. You breathe in the stillness. And in that breath, you feel it. The steady rhythm of love moving through you, whispering, "You are safe now, you don't need to strive anymore, you are home." And as your heart listens, it begins to rest. Because when you finally stop trying to control what you hear, you start to feel what has always been true. God's love never stopped speaking. It just waited for you to listen again. When you realize you were never alone, there comes a moment when the ache begins to shift. You can't explain it, but you feel it. Something unseen, something quiet, something steady. You wake up one morning, and the silence that once felt like a wound now feels like a blanket. The loneliness hasn't vanished, but it has softened, like pain learning how to breathe. You sit in the stillness and realize that somehow you're not afraid of it anymore. Because in that stillness, there is a presence, invisible, yet undeniable. You start remembering moments that didn't make sense before. The day you thought you couldn't go on, and somehow you did. The night you cried so hard you thought your heart would stop, and yet peace found you in the dark. The times you felt unseen, yet something, or someone, kept giving you the strength to take one more step. That wasn't coincidence, that was God's love, silent but constant, walking with you even when you couldn't feel it. Loneliness tells you you're forgotten, but love tells you you're held. And when you look back with new eyes, you begin to see the fingerprints of grace everywhere, in the people who showed up just when you needed them, in the words you stumbled across at the perfect time, in the inexplicable calm that came when everything was falling apart. These weren't random moments, they were whispers of divine presence. You see, God never left. He was there when you broke, sitting in the quiet beside you. He was there in the hospital room, the sleepless night, the prayer that ended in tears. He was there in the silence, and not as an echo but as a heartbeat. You just didn't know it yet. And that's the beauty of his love. It doesn't depend on your awareness. It doesn't vanish when you forget. It doesn't fade when you doubt. God's love is constant, like gravity, holding you even when you try to fall apart. There's a moment when your spirit finally catches up to this truth, when you stop begging for signs and start recognizing what's already here. You stop asking, "Where are you?" and start whispering, "You were here all along." That's the sacred awakening that changes everything. Because once you realize you were never alone, silence stops being empty. It becomes holy. The same stillness that once haunted you now comforts you. The same solitude that once broke you now strengthens you. You begin to see loneliness differently. It's no longer a punishment, it's an invitation, a quiet space where you can meet love without distraction, a place where the noise of the world can't drown out the voice of grace. And as you sit in that realization, you feel peace, not the kind that depends on circumstances, but the kind that settles deep in your bones. You no longer need proof that God is near. You just know. So you close your eyes not to escape the world, but to rest in the truth that you are surrounded by something bigger than pain, stronger than silence, and more faithful than time. You were never alone. You just needed silence to help you see it. When love begins to heal the heart. Healing rarely comes with fireworks. It doesn't arrive with grand signs or sudden miracles. It slips in quietly, like sunlight through a half-closed curtain. You don't even notice it at first. One morning you wake up and realize that the pain isn't gone, but it no longer owns you. The memories still visit, but they no longer command your tears. The silence still comes, but now it feels peaceful instead of cruel. Something has changed. Not around you, but within you. That's how God's love heals. Not by erasing the story, but by redeeming it. It doesn't rush to fix what's broken. It sits with you in the ruins until you can breathe again. It doesn't deny your wounds. It transforms them into places where light can enter. Healing is not forgetting. It's remembering differently. It's looking at what once hurt and seeing grace where there used to be pain. There's a sacred tenderness in that process. Love never forces its way in. It waits to be invited. And when you finally stop fighting the silence, when you stop pretending that you're fine, love begins to move. It takes your shaking hands, your exhausted heart, and whispers, "You don't have to hold yourself together anymore. I've been holding you all along." Maybe that's the most healing truth of all. That you never had to be your own savior. That the same God who let the silence stretch was also the one who stood inside it with you. He didn't keep you from breaking, but he kept your spirit from being destroyed. He let you fall just enough to learn how to lean on love instead of fear. Healing is slow because love is patient. It takes time to unlearn the language of survival and remember the rhythm of peace. You start to notice small changes. The way laughter sneaks back into your days. The way your body begins to rest without anxiety. The way gratitude quietly replaces despair. It's subtle, almost invisible, but it's real. You begin to understand that love was never absent. It was just working in ways your pain couldn't recognize. It was the calm that entered when you stopped trying to control everything. It was the unexpected strength that rose when you thought you were done. It was the still, steady grace that met you at your lowest point and refused to leave. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not a return to who you were, but the discovery of who you are now. Softer, wiser, more grounded, not untouched by pain, but transformed by it. You start to see that the cracks were never flaws. They were invitations, openings for light to pour in. Love doesn't erase the scars. It turns them into stories. And one day, those stories will help someone else heal. You'll look into the eyes of another broken soul and say, "I've been there. I know how it feels. But I also know that love never leaves." And in that moment, the healing that began in you will continue through you. Because that's what God's love does. It multiplies. It heals one heart so that heart can heal another. It turns isolation into compassion, pain into purpose, silence into song. You're not who you were before the storm. You're something deeper, stronger, freer. You've learned that true healing isn't the absence of wounds. It's the presence of peace. So now when you think of your silence, you don't see emptiness anymore. You see the place where love found you and never let you go. When you begin to trust again, trust, such a small word, yet it carries the weight of everything that broke you. After pain, trust feels like a fragile glass in trembling hands. You want to believe again, but fear whispers, what if it happens again? You want to open your heart, but it still remembers the shattering. Healing has begun, yes, but trusting, that's different. Trusting means walking forward without knowing what comes next. It means releasing the need to control the outcome. You stand at the edge of your own heart, cautious, uncertain, and yet something in you, something gentle, persistent, begins to whisper, try again. That's God's love, moving like quiet water through the cracks of your fear. It doesn't push, it invites. It doesn't rush, it waits. Love knows that trust can't be forced. It has to be rebuilt slowly, one heartbeat at a time. There's a beauty in that slowness, because it means you're not pretending anymore. You're not rushing to cover the wounds or prove your strength. You're learning to live honestly, to admit that faith and fear sometimes coexist in the same breath. And that's okay. Even faith trembles sometimes. Even courage doubts. But God's love holds steady through it all. You begin to notice that trusting again doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means choosing to believe that love is stronger than loss. That not everyone who walks away represents rejection. That not every silence means abandonment. It's a quiet courage, this kind of trust. A decision to stand up with shaking knees and whisper, I'll believe again, even if I get hurt again. And somehow, that whisper becomes strength. Because when you say it, when you take that first trembling step, you realize you're not walking alone. The same love that healed you is walking beside you, pacing your steps, steadying your breath. Trusting again is not about certainty. It's about surrender. It's about saying, I don't know what's next, but I know who holds me. And that changes everything. Because when you trust the one who never left, you stop fearing the unknown. You start to see life not as a threat, but as an unfolding, a divine rhythm you can rest inside. Little by little, you begin to see trust returning to the small moments, the way you smile without overthinking it, the way you reach out again, the way you pray not because you need something, but because you miss the connection. That's what trust looks like when it's reborn, fragile, real, honest. The truth is, trust is not about being certain that everything will be okay. It's about knowing that even if it isn't, God's love will hold you through it. It's about letting go of the need to understand and simply saying, I'll stay here, I'll keep walking, I'll keep believing. And then, one day, without realizing it, you'll wake up and find that the fear is quieter. The walls around your heart aren't as tall. The air feels lighter. You're not constantly waiting for something to go wrong. You're just living again, fully, softly, freely. That's when you'll know trust has returned. Not because everything made sense, but because love made you brave. And that's the miracle of it. God's love doesn't erase the past. It redeems it. It turns fear into faith, hesitation into hope, and the ache of loneliness into a quiet strength that no storm can destroy. You no longer live guarded. You live guided. And that's the beginning of peace. When you surrender what you can't control, there comes a point in every journey where holding on becomes heavier than letting go. You try to fix it, to understand it, to plan your way through the unknown, but the harder you try to control, the more exhausted you become. You start realizing that maybe the healing isn't about changing what happened, but about releasing what's no longer yours to carry. We spend so much of our lives clutching the pieces of what broke, believing that if we just hold tight enough, maybe we can make it whole again. But there's a strange mercy in release, a sacred kind of freedom that comes when you finally whisper, "God, I can't do this anymore." And it's in that moment, that quiet surrender, that something shifts. The weight begins to lift, not because the circumstances change, but because your heart does. Surrender isn't weakness. It's trust wearing its truest form. It's not giving up. It's giving over. It's the moment when you finally stop trying to be the savior of your own story and let God's love take its rightful place again. You don't lose control. You trade it for peace. And that peace doesn't come all at once. It seeps in slowly, like morning light after a long night. At first it feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable, because for so long, chaos has felt normal. Anxiety has been your rhythm. But as you begin to breathe again, you realize that peace isn't the absence of movement. It's the presence of trust. Surrender means saying, "I don't have to know how this ends to believe it will be good." It means loosening your grip on what was, so your hands are open to what can be. It means understanding that sometimes God's greatest gifts come wrapped in what you once called loss. You begin to notice that when you stop forcing things to happen, life starts to flow again. Opportunities appear without striving. Peace visits without warning. You stop begging for signs and start living in awareness. You realize that love was never waiting for you to perform. It was waiting for you to release. The truth is, surrender doesn't remove the storm. It anchors you within it. It doesn't promise easy days, it promises steady hands. You stop asking for control and start asking for alignment. You stop praying for answers and start praying for acceptance. And in that quiet transformation, you begin to feel something sacred returning. Rest. Not the kind that comes from escape, but the kind that settles deep in your soul. You're no longer fighting everything that moves. You're learning to flow, to trust, to breathe. The things that once terrified you now lose their power, because you've discovered a deeper safety, the safety of knowing that God's love has never failed you. You realize that the same love that carried you through loneliness will carry you through uncertainty. You no longer need to control what happens next, because you trust who's walking beside you. And that changes everything, because once you surrender, you discover that you were never meant to carry it all. You were meant to rest in the hands that never let go. So breathe deeply. Let go of the need to fix, to prove, to understand. This is not the end. It's the turning point. And in this surrender, you'll find what control could never give you. Peace. When peace finally finds you. Peace doesn't arrive with noise. It doesn't rush in with thunder or celebration. It comes quietly, often unnoticed, like a soft wind that moves through an open window, brushing against your face, reminding you that life is still gentle. One morning, you simply wake up and realize that something has shifted. The chaos that used to roar inside you is gone still. The weight that once lived on your chest feels lighter, and you breathe, really breathe, for the first time in a long time. You look around, and nothing seems dramatically different. The problems didn't vanish, the world didn't suddenly become perfect, but something inside you feels safe. That's peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of God's love so deep, so constant, that even the storms begin to sound like music. Peace is not something you chase. It's something that finds you when you stop running. It doesn't come from answers. It comes from trust. It's born in the same silence that once terrified you, the same stillness you tried to escape. Now that silence has become sacred ground, the place where your soul finally rests without needing to fix or prove anything. You start to notice the beauty of ordinary things again, the way the sunlight paints gold across the walls, the way the air feels lighter after the rain, the way a quiet evening carries a calm you never knew you needed. You realize peace isn't something that happens around you. It's something that awakens within you. It's God's love reminding you. You don't have to strive anymore. You don't have to earn what's already yours. And for the first time, you believe it. You begin to understand that peace was never gone. It was simply waiting for you to slow down enough to feel it. It's been walking beside you this whole time, hidden in the pauses, in the gentle moments between your prayers and His answers. The same silence that once broke you is now your sanctuary. You don't run from it anymore. You sit with it. You breathe in it. And in those breaths you feel held, not by circumstances, but by love itself. This peace doesn't mean life stops hurting. It means that pain no longer defines you. You no longer fear tomorrow because you've met the one who holds it. You no longer carry the past as a wound, but as a teacher. And even when uncertainty tries to whisper again, you recognize the lie, because peace has taught you the truth. You were never alone and you never will be. There's a stillness in you now that no chaos can touch. You've learned that real peace isn't loud, it's steady. It's the calm heartbeat that reminds you you're alive, the quiet confidence that whispers, no matter what happens next, you'll be okay. Because God's love doesn't remove the storm, it stands within it. It anchors you when everything else moves. It guards your heart when fear tries to return. And once peace finds you, it doesn't leave. It grows, quietly, deeply, until it becomes the rhythm of your entire being. You no longer search for peace in people, places, or promises. You've found it where it was always meant to be, within the heart that love healed. When gratitude becomes your language. Gratitude doesn't always begin with joy. Sometimes it begins with tears. It begins in the quiet realization that even through the pain, you survived. It's not about pretending everything is perfect. It's about recognizing the light that never went out. Gratitude is what happens when your heart finally understands that even the broken pieces had purpose. At first it feels strange. You've spent so much time holding on to loss that your hands don't quite know how to hold peace. You look back and see a trail of moments that once felt like endings. But now somehow, they look like beginnings. The things that once hurt the most became the very soil where strength took root. The nights that broke you became the places where love built something eternal. And in that awareness, your soul exhales. You realize that nothing was wasted. Every detour, every delay, every unanswered prayer led you here, to this still, sacred moment of peace. You begin to whisper, "Thank you," not because everything went your way, but because God's love stayed, even when nothing else did. Gratitude shifts your vision. You start noticing what's always been there. The way light filters through the trees, the warmth of a simple meal, the laughter that fills the air after so many quiet nights. You find yourself smiling at small things because you know how easily they could have been lost. Gratitude isn't loud, it's gentle. It's the way your spirit bows before the mystery and says, "I see it now. I see what you were doing all along." There was a time you begged for answers. Now you just whisper thanks. There was a time you resented the waiting. Now you're grateful for it, because it shaped you in ways quick answers never could. Gratitude doesn't erase the past. It redeems it. It teaches you to bless even the parts you don't understand. And suddenly your heart starts speaking a new language. You no longer wake up asking, "Why did this happen?" You wake up saying, "Thank you that I'm still here." That's the language of those who have walked through the fire and found gold in the ashes. It's the voice of a soul that has learned the rhythm of grace. Gratitude becomes your prayer, not for more, but for enough, not for escape, but for presence. Not for control, but for communion. And in that gratitude, joy quietly returns. Not the kind that shouts, but the kind that hums beneath your days. Subtle, steady, sincere. You start to laugh again, not because everything's easy, but because you've learned that peace is not fragile. It's rooted. You begin to notice that the same silence that once frightened you now feels like music. This is what happens when God's love becomes your lens. You stop seeing lack, and you start seeing life. Every scar becomes sacred. Every breath becomes a blessing. Every moment becomes a chance to love again. And gratitude, once just a word, becomes your language, the way your soul speaks to heaven and to the world. You no longer need proof that God is good. You've lived it. You've seen his fingerprints in every valley and every sunrise since. And that realization becomes your greatest prayer. Thank you for not giving up on me when I almost gave up on myself. Because gratitude isn't just the end of pain, it's the beginning of purpose. And when your heart learns to speak that language, everything changes. When love becomes who you are, there comes a moment when love stops being something you seek and becomes who you are. It doesn't happen overnight. It's not a burst of light or a single revelation. It's a slow transformation, the quiet work of grace over time. You've walked through silence, through loss, through surrender, and now what's left is not the same person who began the journey. You've changed, not by forgetting the pain, but by being softened by it. At first, love feels like something external, something you receive, something you chase. You wait for it to come from others, to fill the empty spaces, to make you whole. But as you walk deeper into healing, you realize something sacred. God's love has never been outside of you. It's been living within you all along, waiting for you to notice. You start to understand that to love others is not to pour from your emptiness, but to let overflow what's already been given to you. The same grace that held you now flows through you. You speak more gently. You forgive more freely. You listen without needing to fix. You love without needing to be loved back. Because now, you're no longer searching for love. You're becoming it. And this becoming is holy. It's quiet, humble, radiant. It's not about perfection. It's about presence. You stop trying to impress people with your strength and start inspiring them with your peace. You stop waiting for validation and start giving compassion. You stop asking, why me, and start saying, use me. That's what happens when God's love fills your life so completely that it begins to spill out into every word, every action, every silence. You don't need to preach love. You embody it. You carry it in the way you walk through the world, the way you look at those who are hurting, the way you forgive those who don't deserve it, the way you love those who can't love you back. Because that's what divine love does. It transforms you from within until everything about you becomes a reflection of the one who never stopped loving you. And as you live in that awareness, life begins to change around you. The same situations that once triggered fear now meet peace. The same people who once hurt you now meet grace. The same silence that once scared you now becomes your friend. You begin to realize that love is not just a feeling. It's the very presence of God living through your humanity. You start to see the sacred in everything, in every sunrise, in every face, in every breath. You stop separating the spiritual from the ordinary, because you understand now, everything is holy when it's touched by love. And when people ask how you made it through, how you survived the silence, the loneliness, the breaking, you'll smile. Because you'll know the truth. It wasn't strength that saved you. It was love. Quiet, steady, eternal. And now, that same love has become who you are. Not just something you believe in, but something you become. Because once you've been healed by love, you can't help but live as it. You were never meant to fall. You look back now, and the pieces begin to make sense. The long nights, the silence, the tears, none of it was wasted. Every broken moment was a chapter in the story of your becoming. You see now that what felt like falling was actually being carried, that every time you thought it was the end, God's love was quietly writing a new beginning. You remember the nights you almost gave up, when the weight of it all made you whisper, "I can't do this anymore." And yet, here you are, still breathing, still standing, still finding light in the same world that once felt dark. That's not luck, that's not coincidence, that's grace. The unseen arms that never let you fall. You realize now that every season of loss, every unanswered prayer, every moment of silence was shaping you into someone who could stand on peace instead of fear. You were never being punished. You were being prepared. You were never being forgotten. You were being found. Sometimes love doesn't rescue you from the storm. It teaches you how to walk through it. It doesn't stop the waves. It teaches you how to float. It doesn't remove the night. It gives you the eyes to see the stars within it. That's the miracle of God's love. It doesn't just reach you where you are. It rebuilds you from the inside out. There's something different about you now. You no longer chase what leaves or beg for what breaks you. You've learned to rest in the truth that everything meant for you will stay, and everything that leaves makes room for something greater. You've learned that peace is not fragile, it's fierce, and that the silence that once scared you has become the sound of your strength. You've become the proof that love wins, not because it avoids pain, but because it transforms it. The cracks in your heart have not disqualified you. They've become the windows where the light shines through. You are no longer defined by what hurt you. You're defined by what healed you. And now, as you stand here looking at how far you've come, you realize that falling was never failure. It was faith being born. You were never meant to stay broken. You were meant to rise. You were never meant to carry it all. You were meant to surrender. You were never meant to be enough alone. You were meant to be loved into wholeness. The silence taught you how to hear. The loneliness taught you how to feel. The waiting taught you how to trust. And love, God's love, taught you how to live again. You don't need to understand it all. You just need to rest in this truth. You were never meant to fall, because heaven has always been holding you. So stand in your light now, not as someone who survived, but as someone who's been transformed. The storm didn't destroy you. It revealed you. You are the testimony of what divine love can do with a surrendered heart. You were never alone. You were never forgotten. You were never unloved. You were being written into grace, line by line, breath by breath. And as this chapter closes, peace doesn't say goodbye. It says, welcome home. The eternal God is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms. Deuteronomy 33:27. You never fell. You were always in his hands.